Once upon a time, there was a young lad. He lived in a kingdom which stretched far and wide, even claiming the coastal town he lived in. He was a writer and a poet with sun-bleached hair and skin peppered with freckles. This lad was unlucky in love, but often believed in it. As he grew up, he'd find a potential love, one as fair as a princess, though Her Majesty's sights often sent yonder the horizon, for a prince more suitable for her hand, instead of this diamond in the rough like a poet. This poet came from wealth, but his social standing fell into ruin due to his eccentricities. Unsociable and headfirst in books and the arts, rather becoming than a savvy merchant like his brothers, nor as cutthroat as his forefathers rooted in politics. It didn't help his passable looks that his confidence was likened to a beach during low tide, hardly much in substance. His only company was his empty beachside chateau. Some books and a parchment of poetry nestled in waning dreams. He prayed to God every other night for love and to be loved in return, and one day, when his lad turned into a man, his prayers were answered. During an uneventful sunset, a new family moved into the sleepy town. 5 bodies occupied an abandoned house someone remodeled years ago. Rumor has it, this new family is a rising power among the sea merchants, looking into franchising their trading company into other towns, like our poets here. After staring at the patriarch's figure for a while, the chatterboxes could recall a year or two ago, there was this braggadocious man that's been buying up plots of land, building facilities and boats in their bay. Turns out, he's here. And he brought his family to manage the sea trading post he set up for his workers. They're all well off. The ladies wore strings of diamonds with clusters of pearls around their necks and sauntered in tasteful yet demure-looking fashion. Meanwhile, the men of the household had cufflinks and buttons made of colorful sea glass that glistened in the light, and the body language exuded an air of respectability among the crowd. When the poet walked out to the family to introduce himself, all of them had dark hair and eyes with normal-looking features, except the eldest daughter. She's roughly the poet's age, but lacks a face. Like, no distinguishing features, but dark hair. Yet, none of her family members bothered to veil her, let alone treat her any different than other members of society. In fact, nobody around them reacted wildly to this girl at all. As the newcomers settled into society, the poet gradually got to know the faceless girl. She seemed to sway seamlessly in the salty air and through her interactions with the townspeople. She talked like she had a mouth, and people grinned warmly at her like she smiled at them kindly first. Her kindness seemed to radiate from her hands and feet, ready to help who crossed her path. In fact, the poet had once received homemade warm meals and a listening ear and her shoulder to cry on when he was struggling in life. Even when the man's eyes wandered to other women and wrote sonnets and cried over them, the faceless girl offered a sense of respite by being a good friend for many years to a poet. They've always met up in the daylight and made sure to go home by sunset to protect the lady's virtue. Initially, it took months to build up their correspondence, but he gradually took a liking to her as a companion and attributed a poem or two towards her. In the few times he dedicated a poem to the faceless one, he often used language and imagery that's soft and sobering, like a sunrise bursting through a cold winter morning, with its light beams rippling through the seashore, a welcoming sight after hours of loneliness. Someone, something constant and tender. If there were a girl like her, I would wed them. But I know deep down I need someone as warm, but also stirs up something deep in my heart. More years went by, and the poet grew fearful of his twilight years looming over his head. He is yet to marry, but the princess has yet to take pity on his one hopeful pauper. That winter, the poet couldn't stand how quiet his chateau was at night, so he begged his friend to come over for dinner. After a couple letter exchanges and some insisting, the faceless one relented and agreed to the poet's invitation. Once she agreed, the lady came over to the poet's chateau in the following evening with a basket of food from her maiden home. He sobbed over the matter to his friend over dinner, and when her gentle hand brushed over his own, his blurry vision could somewhat make out a face. Meanwhile, the girl tried to stay with the poor boy as long as she could, but when her curfew drew near, she attempted to peel her hand away from patting his back. But each time she did that, he'd cry and bemoan, pleading to her kind nature to stay a wee more. Surely the faceless one would be as cruel to abandon her friend while he's in dire need. Through a windowsill, once the reddish sunset faded into a dark blue, the moonlight revealed to the poet's moist eyes a pale, lovely blush face, berry-stained plush lips, and deep dark eyes with a concerned look. In all their years of friendship, he'd never seen his friend in such a way. It could be his emotions, or maybe it's the moon, but he was on his knees, lamenting. How could he miss a beauty like her, who was tending to his every need? After all those dazzling whores and wenches, it must have been God's punishment that this poet would turn a blind eye over this gift. Blinking his tears away, the poet wanted to embrace the girl, but she rebuffed his advances. Horrified, she peeled away from the dejected poet, running straight into the night. But the desperate man decided to run after her. He couldn't let a love slip away from his fingers. Not again. When she was the one who showered her affections and care into him in the first place. Under the dim lights, the two weaved around alleyways and empty streets. But when the poet realized where he was, they were at the northern stretch of the beach to the chateau he owned. Yet, he was the only soul by the seaside. Until he found some woman's clothes drift ashore. Some parts had dissolved into a foam, while the rest stayed intact. Barely. As long as it doesn't touch the water. The man fell into a despair, thinking he drove his friend into a watery death, and collected her foamy clothes, dreading how to tell her family in the morning. When night turned to day, the poet knocked at the girl's family's door. And to his surprise, there she was, presentable looking head to toe. But one thing's for certain, she's faceless again. He tried to hide his surprise seeing her there, but as he held the scraps of clothes from the previous night tucked under his arm, the faceless one snatched it right back and kept her replies curt. Since that day, he tried to talk to the young lady, but she only retained her kindness towards his face. And there was a chill in the air separating them, only to be addressed with his family title. Under the sun's watchful eye, the poet tried, He tried his darndest to try to reconnect with the faceless one. He tried stopping her in the street, soliciting her family members, her siblings, parents, neighbors, just to try to see if he could get a shot at getting into her good graces again. He tried giving them gifts. He tried to deliver her sonnets, poems, novellas that he burned the midnight oil for her. But each time he did that, all of his gifts and his labor of love for her returned onto his doorstep the very next night. He was beside himself. All he wanted was for her to look at him again, to notice him, to acknowledge him. Maybe to love him. Open her heart to him at least. Everything went so well before that night. That night where he was so vulnerable that she abandoned him. Yet, despite the pain of the abandonment, the sadness that he felt for his friendship, he mourned over a love that should be. It has to be. For him, she was the only one that could cure him of this love sickness. Oh, beautiful pearl, shrouded in darkness. All this time I've been blinded, cried and short-sighted over countless colored glass. But no one could ever compare to you, especially when moonlight reveals what my heart needed to heal. Your beauty that shines through and ignites my zeal. Oh, please, let me yearn for you. Oh, pearl,